I felt like there was this pressure to like impress people. So like the people who are my peers now like are often further in their career than me and have done this longer, and I need to impress them because I need to like try to fit into that circle, or they could be prospective clients or anything like that.
I'm your host, Tiffany Souter, and this is Scared Confident. Have you ever looked at your choices and wondered, yeah, but is my path normal? I got an email recently from Abby Parker, COO and co-founder of Elate, casually asking if we could connect for coffee. I immediately thought this would make a great coffee over microphones, and I'm so thankful Abby had the courage to say yes. In a lot of ways, Abby's current situation reminds me of where I was in my mid-20s, newly married, running a startup, and wondering, do I have what it takes to be successful in the path that I had chosen? I had many of the same questions that she does now. In our conversation, Abby and I discuss owning your choices and why uncommon outcomes require an uncommon effort. As you listen, ask yourself this question: what outcomes am I shooting for?
So I was 26 when we started Elate and basically left Springbuk on March 30th, got married April 6th, took a 2-week honeymoon, and then officially dove into all things Elate. And not only was like that path really fun to share at a wedding when you're like catching up with these people you haven't seen in years, especially relatives, and they're like, you're doing what? But yeah, I think incredibly isolating is probably like too harsh of a word, but that's oftentimes like how it felt. It's not that I feel like I am above my peers, but I feel like I'm in a different space as my peers, and I no longer have this like group of people that I had previously been with are just in a different space. And not only am I entering like marriage and trying to figure out what that even looks like, but I'm choosing to go on this journey that I, at the time, am like full on confident, like this is going to work. And then you start to realize like, holy cow, everyone says it's hard, but like, no, it's really hard. Like, and feeling like you don't have space or like an opportunity to share in that is difficult because I felt like there was this pressure to like impress people. So like the people who are my peers now, like are often further in their career than me and have done this longer, and I need to impress them because I need to like try to fit into that circle, or they could be prospective clients or anything like that. And so it's like, well, like I've got my husband to chat with about this and he's fantastic, but there's a difference there. And I definitely felt that like isolation in terms of like where I am currently, which I don't say that as to say like no one else feels that isolation, because I'm sure that we all do. But I obviously can only speak from like my own experience.
I remember thinking like this. I was like, well, if I want something different in my life in my 30s and 40s than the pack, then at some point I have to break from the pack, which that for me was my 20s, which is very similar to you. I got married at 24, very similar path. I started with Element 3. Yours is like literally 6 days. Mine was like maybe within 6 months of getting married. So again, just a massive amount of transition, trying to being married out, new career. But honestly, it's a great time to do it because I was like, worst case, we lose our house. Like, I don't know. Nobody's relying on me. My husband can provide for himself. We'll be fine. And I remember I was seeing my friends in careers get promoted, or some of my friends become, stay-at-home moms. And it just started to like the landscape changed. And there is a period where you're like, clearly one of us is wrong and it might be me.
I haven't put it into those words, but that is 100% how it feels. I think especially right now, a lot of my friends have now been married or starting to have kids, and there's a part of me that's like, no chance can I do that. And there's a part of me that feels like you made this choice 2 years ago. You can't have kids right now. What would happen if you did that? And it starts to build up. And I know that that's not true. And like, I know that you're a perfect example of someone who has had children and started a business at the same time, not like one at a time. But there becomes this pressure there of like, should I be in that space? Or like, one of us is wrong. And like, am I the one that took the wrong path? And is this going to end how I want it to? Like, will I ever get to a point where I feel like I can reconcile these two lives that I envisioned for myself, like coming into one? And I don't feel like I'm at that point right now, but I believe that hopefully at some point I will. But it's certainly challenging when you're in the thick of it to see how that could possibly be a reality. You were like 4 or 6 years out of college when you chose to do Element 3 and start that journey. Why did you make that choice? Like beyond I want to be in a different place in 30s and 40s, like why specifically Element 3? What made you believe in yourself enough to think like, I can do this? Because from what I can tell, it wasn't exactly in your background necessarily to do it.
No, 100% no. So I went to school for finance. I worked at Lilly right out of college. And I remember one day walking through the halls of the offices I was working in this great big company. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my word, I can have my best professional day of my whole life, or I could be sleeping under my desk and the exact same things would happen. Literally the exact same things. The stock price would be the same, everything, like maybe one person would be pissed, but basically the same thing would happen. And I just felt so insignificant. And I've since learned that that significance is a really important part of my like soul. And so that idea of, and I mean, I had an awesome boss. I had a challenging job. You know, I had more benefits and pay than I likely was earning, all kinds of stuff. But I just felt invisible. And I really believe this is the life path I was supposed to be on. And so some of that discomfort in my worldview was God just making me uncomfortable and unsettled on that because I had a different path I needed to go on. And so I kind of left not knowing what I was going to do, but just knowing something different was what I needed to do. And so through a series of events, I don't remember that clearly and make no sense at all. I met who was the previous owners of what's now Element 3 in a wild glug of audacity. I was like, hey, I think I should buy your business. And they were like, that sounds great. And if somebody sells you something quickly, you maybe shouldn't buy it. And so my dad and I assumed a $30,000 loan that they had in the business, gave them an employment guarantee, and the transaction was done. And then that was how we got here. So I wasn't the president at the beginning. I was just working in it as a marketer, which I have a finance degree. I've never taken a single marketing class in my life. I've never worked for a marketer. I've never worked in an agency. Like, it's on paper, straight failure. And like, if you did a business case on does any city on the planet need another agency, decidedly it would come back as no. It's a saturated market. The barrier to entry is really low. Like, it's just a disaster decision making. But I just really was committed to it. And I think that was the difference. And so my dad was a owner in it, but not active in the business at all. And I went to him one day and said, hey, I think this is what needs to happen. And there's some stuff. And he's like, well, why don't you just run it? And that really wasn't my aim. I wasn't pitching for that. I had never pictured that. But he was like, you clearly have some vision for it. And I just tried really hard. I asked a million questions. I think even you reaching out to me and being willing to like be vulnerable about the stuff you don't know. There's so many people that wanted to help me be successful that I didn't even know that. I had no idea. I didn't know that. And there's a lot of quiet, lonely moments too. I remember being in the office at like 10:30 p.m. and like walking out to my car with the bugs and like humidity. And I remember getting out of bed at 4:15 in the morning to like get stuff done. It is hairy. You know what I mean? But I was just committed. And I don't even know why. I just was committed. And not that there weren't moments of doubt. And what I found in almost 20 years of doing Element 3, that there are like these recommitment ceremonies. I think it's probably the same way for like people who are in jobs for a really long time. Your life circumstances change, the business changes, stuff changes in your life. And you kind of have to go back through the process of, am I committing to the thing it is now? And does that still make sense for me? But those first few years, I mean, put blinders on. I don't know if you experienced this, but it's like I didn't make time for other things. We just were focused. And I think that helped just like speed up the learning too, because it was just like all in for sure.
I think what you're sharing like definitely resonates with like where I'm at right now. And it's hard because I think there's a lot of talk about like finding that balance and knowing that you can't drown yourself. But also if you don't drown yourself, you're probably not going to succeed. And so it's like, well, which of these paths do I take and how do I try as best I can to blend those things? And a lot of it, I didn't realize I guess I cognitively knew we weren't like taking vacations or taking time off, but it wasn't until my husband had like all of these abundance of days off that he's at the end of his fiscal year and like can take every Friday off for 2 months and stuff. We've been at this for 2 years and we really haven't gone anywhere. And how do I again, I like say balance, but it's not going to ever be like an equal balance right now. It's just like, how can I take like a moment here or there, or like pour and invest into our marriage, knowing that my goal is that is like the most important thing to me, but also to your point, like I have to find these random hours to fit in Elate stuff. There are so many commitments I have to have. And I think this is one of my other questions for you is thinking back to those early days. One of the things that currently ignore or else it will paralyze me. But I'm curious, like, how can I work through this? And curious if you felt something similar is like the various types of pressure that can be put on you. Okay, I have this business and there's a lot of pressure to succeed on that. And then I have my employees and I feel an obligation to succeed for them because their livelihood depends on it. And then I have my family and people and friends that I don't want to let down. Then I have my husband who I asked him to take this financial risk to start this thing and believe in me. And I don't want to let him down. And then like at the very core of that, it's like, I don't want to disappoint myself, or I don't want to embarrass myself, honestly, or I don't want to let myself down. My current coping mechanism with that is like, ignore that. Just don't think about it. But I sense that like there's probably a better way to handle that potentially. And I'm curious, like, did you feel those pressures? And if so, how did you like work through those versus just ignore?
So I definitely felt the pressure. For me, some of it was helpful because it pushed me to perform at a level that I didn't believe I was capable of. Go harder, go longer, just fight for it. And so some of it was healthy for me. I also have had to learn that I'm very task-oriented. It is my natural tendency to determine whether I had a great day or a bad day based on how much shit I got done. And so then I believe other people evaluate me on how much shit I got done. And this is like what comes with age. Instead of being like in my heart, I am enough as a human. My performance is different than who I am as a person. And so in the relationships I have, my value to the world and my value to the people that love me has nothing to do with my performance. It's just who I am. And my performance is what I do. And every place that my life has broken, it has been because I get so focused on the performance task. It's my natural bent. And I forget to show up as a human. I don't see myself that way. I don't understand the like emotional, relational part of life. I'm like, I can just like mow over all that. And so once I started to understand the people in my life are there because they love me, it's not because they are connected to my performance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That I could say they don't care. I just care. I'm bringing my expectation of myself into this relationship. And I get my husband and I have also, in the very early years, took a lot of financial risk. He was also a business owner for the first decade of our marriage, and I was too. And so we took a lot of financial risk for each other and on one another. And I get that of like that pressure of if I don't deliver, and I remember going through my head, like we signed a 7 or 10 year lease with the Pyramids, and it was $750,000 was what the like total value of the lease was. And I remember being like, I don't know for sure we're going to be in business that long. And my dad had to sign a personal guarantee on it. And so, which meant that whether I was in business or not, he was going to have to pay for it. And I remember doing the math in my head of like what I would need to make in the open market if Element 3 went away, like what my salary would need to be able to make that payment to my dad to pay for that, and also make up the difference between what my husband's income was able to cover with like our mortgage. I remember doing that math, which that just gives you a read into like, it is real. It's like, don't worry about it. Just work hard. It's like, no, like actually there are dollars and there's banks and there's people who are going to be real pissed off if you can't deliver on this, and they will actually take your collateral or they will like take your family's money, like whatever needed to happen. And I think at the end of the day, I tell myself this even today, I am the company's best shot at success. And on the day that I stop believing that, that means I have to be really clear and have the humility to say, well, then if I'm not, who is? And my job is to identify that, find that person, and put them in place so that we can do what we need to do. But I'm everybody's best shot. So, well, here we go. And then I'd sort of be like, time to go to work. I guess we'll do it. But there were times when I would lay in bed at night and understand the realness of what was happening.
I think that those are the moments where I'm like, am I allowed to allow myself to think about these things? Like, am I allowed to think about the option of failure? And those are the moments where I have to like allow myself to think it, but then to some extent, like draw a line and say, like, you can't go past there, because if you have to go past there someday, you'll do it. But until that day, you're not going to do it. So there is like a line drawn in the sand, but at the same time, like there are moments where I'm like, yeah, like laying in bed at night, like, well, how would this even happen? Like, what would happen if this, what are the domino effect of this happening?
For me, if I thought through kind of what my plan was or what's the worst possible thing, then I could be like, okay, I see it and I've named it and I'll live through it. I sort of had to go through the thinking process. So I had the same thoughts with element 3. I mean, for a long time, it's like in agency world, in the early days, you maybe have 30 days of revenue, maybe. I mean, it's like literally on the edge all the time. It was not ever comfortable financially. And so I remember going through that thinking process of, okay, if my 8, 10, 12, 22 employees, if I have to suddenly announce that we're out of revenue, what's that look like? And I was like, that would be a super sucky day. Not the only person on the planet that's had to go through that. So mop yourself up. It would suck. The other is, how long would it take me to call my network and help them land the best job I possibly could? Okay, I could activate that way. I could be helpful. Would they be mad at me? Probably. But was I doing anything egregious to put us in a place of unnecessary risk, or was I making the best decisions I knew to make? And I was like, I'm making the best decisions I knew to make. They all know we're a small company. They all know I'm an inexperienced leader. They all know, like, I wasn't lying to them about any of that. They all knew. And so that was part of the excitement. It was part of the risk. And it was part of the reality that I was going to have to deal with if we didn't get to where we needed to be. And so that's how I would be like, okay, could happen. Not where I'm going to put my energy, but I understand it and I'm good now. And then I would like sort of run on with my life for a while. The other thing I have learned to love, actually, and this is hard at the beginning because there's so much that's hard, is in my experience in being around lots of businesses, not only as a business owner for 20 years, but we have lots of people who come in our walls as an agency that works with a bunch of companies. I feel like my observation is that more people totally slam against the wall because they got comfortable and they stopped trying than it is that they were like, I'm paying a lot of attention to everything that's going on because I am, Jim Collins talks about productive paranoia. I am productively paranoid. I understand all this can go in an instant. This is super hard. And so I was like, if I'm paying a lot of attention and have the willingness to be honest with myself about what's going on, I can solve through a lot of stuff, I'm pretty sure. And so that would start to dissipate the fear for a while. And then I'd have to go through that exercise again.
In many ways, as you were saying that, well, there's two things that you said that really stood out to me. The first is being willing to look yourself in the mirror and say, like, did I do anything egregious to like make this fail? And if the answer is no, like I'm doing everything I can, then you're right. Like there's just like this ease that can come from that. But then the second piece that you're talking about is like this productive paranoia. And like, I think you just said the phrase of, I feel confident I could solve through most of those problems. And it's made me think about this of like, okay, like, is the anecdote of fear confidence? And obviously this comes back to like your whole podcast name. Is it fear that like erodes my confidence and convinces me I can't do the things that I cognitively believe like I am capable of, I've done before, or I've taken on like similar challenges and succeeded to some extent? Or like, do those things live together? Or like, how do I like allow those things to live together and like have that productive paranoia almost without it turning into just paranoia and that taking away my decision-making ability?
Well, I think fear tells us things that aren't true. And that's what you have to have the like awareness to interrogate. So When I was in the client work like crazy, I was selling, I was trying to lead the company, and I was, all the back office stuff and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it was like bananas. And every Monday I would be like, hold my breath. People can't see this, but I would be like, the goal is to get to Friday and not screw something up, forget something major, or just blow it. And that was my energy. And I would be like, I'd get to Friday and I'd be like, oh my word, I'm alive. And I didn't miss anything huge. And I started to be like, I don't know, let's say 20 weeks went by and I was able to be like, hey, do I ever get to Friday and say, I missed the biggest priorities, I screwed up the hardest projects, and I was the wrong person in the room for the hard things? No, I never get to Friday and say that. My mind has the ability to filter the most important priority for the day. I'm going to trust that. Cool. I'm going to go to work. And it's like the same thing happened in the day, but my mindset was totally different. And now I'm like, I can just rest in it differently, even when it's super busy, to be like, I know my brain is going to pick up the most important thing to do. It just is. And I'm just going to be present for that instead of that like gripping fear of like, what am I going to screw up? And so when you start to understand your fear, be like, but is it true? Is it true that I get to Friday and I've screwed a bunch of stuff up? Like, that's not true. Fear is just trying to get me to believe there's too much. You're running too fast, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, there's not. Yes, there's a lot. But I have really big expectations of my life and my time. If it was easy, everybody would do it. Like, that's just the thing. It's super hard. And you have to have the stamina for it. I want to go to the balance thing. Frankly, I hate the conversation. Balance for me is other people's expectations of my time. I live a completely unbalanced life as it relates to other people's definition of how much rest I should have, how many vacation days that we should have, how many hours I should hang out. Completely unbalanced. And it's totally my choice. I love it. I also want to do a lot of things with my life. And to do that, I have embraced that requires an unbalanced effort by other people's definition. To me, totally balanced. So I want to juxtapose that with saying, like, I totally respect and understand rest is important. I sleep a lot compared to what people think. I'm like a 6 to 8 hours a night person. That to me is important to my body, and that is balance. Balance to me is not, I watch nothing on TV. I know nothing about Netflix and Hulu and all that. I run in the morning to catch up with my friends. Very efficient. Like, this is how we connect. I need to work out and I love my friends. And so we're going to do those things together. And it always happens between 5:30 and 6:20 in the morning. Like, it's butt crack 30, nobody's around and nobody can be on the phone with me. And that's just what it requires. And I love it. Almost every day I'm up by 5:15. And so, like, I think there is a healthy narrative around our understanding of anxiety and depression and like our like mental health. I think there's a really healthy discussion around that is really important for us to normalize. And I think in places we are making very unrealistic expectations of what it takes to have profound success, because it's just hard and it just takes time. And so when we talk about just taking big pregnated breaks, you don't always get both. Again, I have chosen to have 4 kids. I have chosen a 2-career home. I have chosen to want to lead the company. I have chosen to want to be on boards. I have chosen to want to be really involved in church. I have chosen those things. And I am not a victim of those. I choose those things. And that has expectations for my time that looks unbalanced to most other people. And that's okay. I had to go through the thinking cycle of this idea of like, but I work a lot. It's like, totally do. Yeah. Choose it. Love it.
I appreciate you pressing in on this, because in many ways, like, it's not that I need like everyone's permission to do different things, but like to some extent I realize I have fallen into that, right? Like, I have, to your point, like, I've allowed other people's expectation of what balance looks like to infiltrate my own life, and then change my beliefs of like what I believe frankly, like what balance is even like feasible right now. And to feel as though just like add that to the list of things I'm failing at balance versus like taking that lens and like frankly taking ownership of my own balance and saying like, it's okay that my balance looks different or that I'm unbalanced, frankly, or it's okay that I chose to do this at the same time that I chose to start a marriage. And it's okay that my time with my husband, like we do weekly coffee dates now because it's like, that's when we can get time together. And it's not like I don't have children yet. Like, it's not like I have all these abundance of activities in the evening, but like, frankly, in the evening, my brain is not able to like shut off from work yet. Like that's a morning thing only. So that time is not going to be preserved for me and my husband to have super fruitful conversation because I'm probably still stressed from the day or still marinating on things from the day or still like churning on things from the day. And I appreciate you saying it because I do agree. It's not to discount any ounce of like importance on mental health and everyone finding their own balance of what that looks like. But I do feel like there's almost this like, it's not shame put upon people who are unbalanced, but like this ounce of me allowing myself to believe like I'm doing it. It's yet another thing I'm doing wrong versus something I'm choosing to take on very intentionally in this season of life that I'm in right now because I know that I can. And because to your point, like I know that I want something different. And this probably goes back to like where we first started of like me wanting something different inherently means that I will probably, for some moments of that, be more isolated or alone than wanting something that's the same as everyone else. And that choice just inherently like makes that a reality. And that's not a bad thing. It's a choice. I need to own it. And I almost feel like I needed that like kind of kick in the pants to be like, well, if you want something different, you can't have the same balance as everyone else. Like you can't have both worlds. And I think that's a really helpful and frankly like healthy for me reminder.
Uncommon outcomes require uncommon effort. I think some people can trick it. Like there are some people who are at the right time, at the right place, the right investors, the right product idea, and they became, they have hundreds of millions of dollars. But for most, that's not how it happens. And it takes an uncommon effort. And I think it really becomes socially taboo to say that in our current environment of like, we do need to be careful. And that is not to discount the fact that I have had to learn how to rest and to learn how to be emotionally available. And my husband and I have been to counseling. I'm really public about that. I myself spent a couple of years seeing a therapist. It was super helpful in my growth. And it doesn't change the fact that it is really hard and it takes time. And I didn't go through any of those experiences and say, I needed to spend fewer hours. It just takes time. And I think that acceptance of this is what I've chosen, and there is a requirement that comes from wanting to do those things, like you say, at the same time. And there's been so many times I've thought, if only from 20 to 40, I could build my business. From 40 to 60, I could have kids. From 60 to 80, I could volunteer my time. And from 80 to 100, I could be an investor. And then from 100 to 120, I could run a family foundation. And then 120 to 140, I could be a tennis pro. That would be something I would love. There's all these things I want to do. You don't get to do them in 20-year increments separately. It's not how life practically plays out. And so some people choose to put those dreams aside, totally their prerogative, perfect. Some of us choose to try to do all those dreams at the same time, totally our prerogative, perfect. It's okay. We all get to choose. That is what is so cool. But let's not place our own decisions onto other people's environments. I would rather be doing hard things than bored things. This is I love it. The fear keeps me alive. It helps me know I'm still growing. At 41, I feel just as invigorated as I did at 28. And I love it. But that's what I want to do. So great.
Yeah. But I almost feel like that statement, I'm 41. I have worked my butt off the last 20 years. And I'm grateful that I did it. It's so rare to hear. Usually it's I'm 41 and I look back and I'm disappointed because I missed out on X, Y, and Z. And I feel like that's what I keep hearing. And I almost feel like I allow that to give me the excuse to say oh, you do need more balance, Abby. You can't get to that. Or I allow it to be an excuse because I'm oh, well, so-and-so is saying that they wish that they would have done this differently. And I'm well, I'm not so-and-so. That's not who I am. It's not where I'm destined to end up. not different, like I'm so special, but like I just am a different human than other humans. And I feel like it is rarer, especially for a female, to say that. Like, I'm 41, I'm proud of the decisions that I made to live an unbalanced life. Again, balance looks different to everyone. Like, everyone has the same 24 hours in a day, and any hour you take up doing X means you're not doing Y, Z, and every other letter of the alphabet. But like for you, it's finding like that balance that works specifically for you in that time, in that season for your business, but also in that season for your family and as a human. So yeah, I just appreciate you saying it, because I don't feel like those are the things I overwhelmingly hear. And those are things I frankly feel like in where I am right now, like I need to hear to push me further and say like, you can go further, you can push yourself more, but also your actions are not who you are. Kind of to what you were speaking to earlier, like your accomplishments are not your value. So it's like, okay, let me just figure out how to lump all of those in together and feel and believe all those things at the same time, which is challenging, but I think is important.
I love JR. I love him as a person, his character. He's funny. He's all these things. And I love him as a person. And then there are things that he does that sort of add to that. So he unloads the dishwasher. Oh my word, thank you so much. I love that you unloaded the dishwasher. That gives me so much life. Whether he unloads or doesn't unload the dishwasher, that's a task that brings joy to me. It doesn't change who he is. Let's say he doesn't unload the dishwasher. Pisses me off. Unload the dishwasher. But it doesn't change who he is. And I still love him. I might be irritated by the action. And I think that's how those of us who are performers, we change our self-acceptance and our self-identity based on whether we did or didn't unload the dishwasher based on that example, versus being able to see like, no, I'm clear in who I am. I'm clear in what I value. I'm clear in the fact that I will honesty overall. I'm proud of the fact that the way I lead, I'm proud of the way, like those are things that are inside of me. And then I may or may not make element 3 successful. But even if I make it unsuccessful, that doesn't change who I am from a values perspective.
That example is helpful because it's very easy to see with someone else. And I can cognitively believe that about myself, but I still find it very hard.
Oh, it takes practice. It takes so much mental practice of I'm allowing my performance to dictate my own self-acceptance. And as you lead and as you get more impact and influence, your own self-acceptance becomes so important, because otherwise you start to lead for other people's acceptance. And that can lead you down weird places, which is probably a different conversation.
I think you were speaking as fear and like speaking a truth, which was like, I can be extraordinary and have blemishes. I can be extraordinary and have blemishes. And there's something like super profound about that, of who I am is extraordinary, but what I do may have flaws. And even who I am may have flaws, but to the extent of the choices I make, not who God made me to be or who I am meant to be and who I choose to be. But there was something of that just like really struck me, of like the simplicity, but the profoundness of believing and allowing myself to believe that I can be extraordinary and I am extraordinary. And yet I know every blemish that I have, and I can point that out very clearly, but like that doesn't change the extraordinary aspect of it as well.
Owning your gifts and understanding that those get delivered in imperfect ways does not change that is still the core of your gift and who you are. And I think that's such a big part of the head game of being an early stage entrepreneur, of like, if you don't believe, nobody is going to.
What I hope you take from our conversation today is this. The first thing is, if you want an uncommon outcome, it's going to require an uncommon effort. And the second is, if you find yourself repeatedly asking, is my path normal? I'd say, who cares? The most important thing is that you have peace about the path that you're choosing. So what else is on your mind? Text me, 317-350-8921, 317-350-8921. And be sure to follow along on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening today.